Paramatma and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas or the yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavan, or the personality of Godhead, is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun god, as the sun rays are to the sun god. Less intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization, but those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. As it is explained in the first shloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusions of relativity. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known, but in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. There is no difference between the energy and energetic, but there is a difference of quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is the sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. Translation again. It's slanted. It's meant to be slanted. Things should not be slanted. Bet you. Everything in the material world is slanted. Translation again, learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. We are dealing in this verse, especially with the topic of tattva. Tattva. Tattva means what is absolute, tattvam, the absolute truth. The subject matter of tattva is the main subject matter that our acharyas deal with in a very deep and complete manner. Whenever we come across this verse, we immediately think about especially two of our foremost personalities, acharyas, who have, in a very exemplary manner, elaborated and discussed the whole matter of tattva. The word tattva comes up again and again in our various literatures, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. And unless one has a very clear understanding of tattva, then things will not be clear, isn't it? The foremost personality who very elaborately deals with the subject matter of tattva is Srila Jiva Goswami. He has books that have the name Tattva, Tattva Sandarbha. Tattva Sandarbhas. Who has read Tattva Sandarbhas? Hare Krishna. A part of it. Who has never heard about Tattva Sandarbha? It happens sometimes. Yeah, Tattva Sandarbha. Srila Jiva Goswami, who had the good fortune of associating with Srila Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. He is recognized as that greatest personality at that time, 500 years ago, and even today. The Tattva Sandarbha, one of our devotees actually completed or made his PhD on Tattva Sandarbha. It's very wonderfully presented, very scientifically presented. The other great acharya who has very nicely elaborated on the subject matter of tattva is Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. In a small book, which is, although small in quantity, is very heavy in quality. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Dasamula Tattva. Who has read Dasamula Tattva? Hey! Back to school. Yeah. Dasamula Tattva discusses very nicely, very elaborately the subject matter. The whole book is on tattva, and to understand tattva, we need to also understand what is called sambandha, abhideya, and prayojana. This verse is a philosophy, is a verse on philosophy. So naturally, the subject matter of philosophy is not always so easy to digest, correct. But it is basic and most important. Actually, when we begin to give it the due attention, then gradually becomes, more clear to understand. So this is one of the verses actually that Srila Jiva Goswami refers to establish the reality and the conclusion. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And unless we get our tattva correct, unless we understand things properly, then we will not be complete in our in our understanding. We will not be complete or successful, actually, in attaining what is meant to be the perfection of life, which is to become self-realized. To become self-realized means to actually come to this understanding of the differences that are there in terms of tattva. Three features, as mentioned here: Bhagavan, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, and Brahman, rather. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So, in the Dasamula Tattva of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he very systematically, following in the footsteps of Srila Jiva Goswami, speaks on this subject matter. And he begins by establishing, again, like Srila Jiva Goswami, the first of the six we call it Tattva Sandarbha is Sat Sandarbhas, rather, is Tattva Sandarbha. And in the main lesson, we could say, the main instruction in Tattva Sandarbha is establishing the source of all tattva, the source of all knowledge, isn't it? How, from where and how can we actually acquire perfect knowledge? And in a very wonderful way, Srila Jiva Goswami establishes that actually the Vedic literatures, the Vedas, they are the source of all knowledge, and that he goes quite deeply in analyzing and giving all kinds of very nice references that, yes, the Vedas are the basis and the source of all knowledge. But, like the Vedas, the Vedic writings are many. We have the original Vedas, we have the Upanishads, we have the Puranas, we have Vedanta Sutra, we have so many different writings that were actually put into written form by, as we know, Srila Vyasadeva, 5,000 years ago at the beginning of Kali Yuga. What Srila Jiva Goswami does is that he establishes that the essence of the Vedas is the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he goes on to explain that actually the Srimad Bhagavatam at this present time in history, for all of us who are born in this Kali Yuga, this Srimad Bhagavatam, referred to as the Samam Bonum, the supreme absolute reality, is even more important, more accessible than the original Vedas, which initially might seem, how is that possible? It is possible because Srila Vyasadeva, who is, as we chant every day, the literary incarnation of Godhead, he has elaborated, he has presented the essence of the original Vedas in the form of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which culminates, of course, in the 10th canto, the description of the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In other words, Krishna is the culmination of all knowledge. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually, he in the 10 subject matters that he deals with, 7 of those are in relation to Sambandha Gyan. Now this is very interesting actually, because most of us, we have difficulty on that beginning level of Sambandha. Sambandha, we can see this especially in Kali Yuga. We have relationship problems. True or not true? Isn't it? The whole world is full of problems. People cannot get along with one another. It means we have identity problems. Our big problem in the material world is our identity. No, we've forgotten our original identity. So, in describing the 7, there are 7 tattvas that deal with identity. 7 tattvas that deal with the subject matter of Sambandha. 3 of them are in relation to Krishna, and 4 of them are in relation to the jiva. Little summary of the Dasa Mula Tattva, since the subject matter is in regards to Tattva. So the first is directly connected. The first of the 3 that describe Krishna is directly connected with this verse here. The first 3 tattvas describing Krishna, the first is Param Tattva, that Krishna is the Param Tattva, is the source of all Tattva. He is the topmost, Samambonam, as referred to in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he is known as the Supreme Absolute Truth in these 3 features which are mentioned here. In addition to being Param Tattva, Krishna is also the second aspect that is described is in reference to his energies. It's also referred to here in the purport. He is known as Shaktiman. Shaktiman, he is the source of all energies. Internal, external, and marginal. And the third aspect of Krishna, or rather of the Absolute Truth, is that he is Rasa Samudra. Rasa Samudra, which is a concept that is very unique in our parampara, in terms of describing and understanding the Absolute Truth. Rasa Samudra means he's an ocean of transcendental mellows. He is a source of all transcendental emotions, of all different rasas. Rasa is something which cannot be separated from the living entity. We are actually hankering. Rasa means taste. Rasa means mellow. Rasa is directly connected with attraction, actually. And Krishna, he is also known as Rasaraj. Rasaraj, he's the king of all rasa. All rasas actually originate from him. And we're all of us, actually, we cannot live without rasa. Just like when we cook, there needs to be some taste in the food. Otherwise, it's not attractive, isn't it? So taste, attraction, this is all this very deep subject matter, which is elaborately described, especially in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So these are the three aspects that that describe the help us understand Krishna in his original nature. He is Param Tattva. He is Shaktiman, the controller and the source of all energies, and he is Rasa Samudra, ocean of transcendental mellows. And not only we cannot understand about Krishna without understanding our relationship with Krishna. What is our relationship with Krishna? So that is explained in four, you could say, features. The first of those four is the jiva, living entity, is amsha. Amaivangsho jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. Sanatana. We are the eternal amsha. We eternally amsha. Means we can never become Krishna. Krishna is Krishna eternally, and the jiva is jiva, part and parcel, amsha, eternally as well. So therefore, the philosophy of becoming one automatically is refuted. So jiva is amsha. But jiva, because he is, amsha means also very small particle, like the rays of the sun. So in because that living entity, the jiva, is very small, he can take on two positions, either as nitya baddha or as nitya mukta. So those living entities in the material world, they are referred to as nitya baddha. They're conditioned, eternally conditioned by the modes of material nature. Why do we say eternally? Nitya means eternal. Why do we say eternally? Conditioned. Huh?
For a long time.
Yeah, for a long time. Very, yes. Whereas, so the other position of the jiva is that he is nitya mukta, nitya baddha, nitya mukta, or nitya siddha. The vast majority of living entities are nitya siddha or nitya mukta, and they never leave the spiritual world. They're eternally in the spiritual world. Sometimes they come when Krishna performs his pastimes. What are the three types of living entities? Living entities who partake or participate in Krishna's pastimes. We just mentioned one. Those are nitya siddha. Then two other categories. Some of the demigods. Some demigods also get opportunity to be part of Krishna's pastimes. And the third type of living entities, this should be of interest to all of us, are those who seriously practice Krishna consciousness and become elevated and qualified to actually, before going back to the spiritual world, we get to be with Krishna somewhere in the material world to kind of like get some fine tuning. Yeah. So, like this, living entity in the material world can become, fortunately, can change from being nitya baddha to we call sadhana siddha, through the process of sadhana. That's why sadhana bhakti, which is very nicely, elaborately presented by Srila Rupa Goswami, is that process by which we can go from our position of being nitya baddha to sadhana siddha, which is not different from nitya siddha. And the fourth tattva that is explained by Srila by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is that the jiva's amsha, either nitya siddha or nitya badha, and other one is Veda Abeda. Veda Abeda means simultaneously one in or same in quality with Krishna, but different in quantity. Yeah, Veda Abeda. Our philosophy, Mahaprabhu's philosophy, yeah, Achinta Veda Veda Tattva, simultaneously, inconceivably one with and different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So these describe, when we know this nicely, perfectly, then our problems with Sambandha become resolved. Otherwise they remain confused. Yeah. So the first is establishing the source of all knowledge, which is the Vedas. The other 7 describing Sambandha, 3 for Krishna, 4 for the living entity Jiva. That brings us to 8. Then 9 and 10. 9th Tattva described in the Dasamula Tattva is referring to Abhideya. What is Abhideya? Activity. What is meant to be the activity means bhakti, devotional service. So the 9th process of bhakti, devotional service, is what is described in the Dasamula Tattva. And the 10th and the last Tattva is referring to Prayojana. Where do we go with all this? The end result, the goal, the destination, which is in the Satsandarbha, is referred to as the Priti Sandarbha. The goal to develop Krishna Prema, our original transcendental nature or position as eternal, pure servants of Krishna.
You mentioned this 4 out of the 7 about the jiva.
Yes.
So
Amsha.
Amsha.
Amsha, then Nitya Baddha, Nitya Siddha, and then Veda Baddha.
Nitya Baddha, Nitya Mukta, that is second and third in that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Means that the jiva, because he is tatastha shakti, marginal energy, he can go either this way or that way. It's like when you're on the fence, you can either fall this side or that side. So those who come in the material world, they become nitya baddha, condition, and because it's very, very long time, it's referred to as nitya baddha. But fortunately, we're not. I mean, it's like not like in Christianity. If you're not surrendered, then you become eternally damned, which is not a very good proposal for anyone. Yeah. So we are conditioned by the modes of material nature, all the jivas, living entities who come in the material world, but by the mercy of Vaishnavas, by the mercy of Guru, we can become liberated.
The 8th one is a specific.
The
8th.
8th.
Abhideya. 9th is the Abhideya.
9th is Abhideya, and 10th is Prayojana.
Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, we can understand by this analysis and description how Sambandha is like most important. I mean, yeah. And in many ways, within a society, an international society as we have, it's even more challenging. Yes. Because compared, let's say, to the early days when Srila Prabhupada was the only guru. There was only one guru, and it was a little, much easier to kind of maneuver, kind of. But now we have, it's more of a challenge because not only, let's say, a devotee or disciple needs to relate, okay, how to relate, what is my relationship with my present guru, then what is my relationship with other gurus, and what is my relationship with Krishna, with the founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. We've been going around this for many, many years, and because it's a very deep and involved subject matter. And therefore the importance of hearing from the the commentaries from our Vaishnava acharyas, because they are situated on that elevated, liberated platform, and therefore they are constantly throwing light and giving explanation, and they specialize. They specialize in the subject matter of tattva. And we all know, we refer to that verse all the time, to understand about tattva, that is the preliminary qualifications which are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, for someone who, actually these qualities, when we study this topic of education, this comes up actually also. The same qualities that one needs to develop as a disciple are the same qualities that are needed for one to become actually an ideal student, isn't it? So what are those three qualities again? Yes, pranipat, developing that mood and mentality, and being inquisitive, and being engaged in devotional service, in seva. Yeah. So we can see actually how consistent and very scientific is the whole subject matter of tattva. And because tattva also deals with, when we speak about the three tattvas describing Krishna as Shaktiman, so Shakti, that is also the scientific aspect, is both there in terms of spiritual Shakti and material Shakti, material energy. Yeah, that's why whole material nature is very is also perfect and complete, and it is only the Vedas that give us actually that complete full understanding of how the material energy is working, and it is still, even though we have so many scientists in modern, in the world today, there's so many aspects and so many things about the material world that we cannot understand, that we cannot grasp so easily. And especially even on our planet. I mean, we are, our planet is the smallest planet, and it's like totally bewildering at nighttime if we're not living in the city. And at nighttime, living in the city, you cannot see the stars. But everything is going on in a very prearranged manner, and based on science, and that is meant to be the subject matter for devotees. Not only studying the spiritual transcendental science, but also knowing about how the material world is functioning. Knowing material science is also of importance for us. Prabhupada makes reference to the very first, isn't it, shloka of the first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. A few years back, I was hearing, actually an interview. I think most of you know this devotee. We're talking on the subject of rasa. So, Rasaraj, Prabhu. Rasa Raj Prabhu actually was in America studying, as we had a number of devotees. Yashomati Nandan Prabhu was also in America when he came in contact with devotees. So he, somebody had interviewed him, and he was relating how he first came in contact with devotees. For those who may not know, Rasa Raj Prabhu actually very intellectual, very closely connected with Bhakti Raghava Institute, wrote many articles, very deeply analyzing philosophy. So he was working, I believe, in Detroit. And we have the Fisher Mansion, ISKCON temple there. So he was, I don't know how long he had been in America, but he was working there, and he had one friend who told him one day, because he had a hard time finding vegetarian food, especially 50 years ago, when vegetarianism was less known. So one day, one of his friends told him, actually, there's a place you can get vegetarian food. It's a Hare Krishna temple. Go there. So I said, okay, because we have to have good food every day to be healthy, and people who are strict vegetarians find it difficult, and nowadays it's maybe less of a problem. So he went there alone, actually, to the temple, and he arrived late. His friend told him every Sunday they have very nice food, Sunday feast, love feast. So somehow he got late. I don't know, maybe he was caught in traffic or something. And practically there was only, there was nobody there practically, except one devotee. So anyways, the temple is a very nice place. And temples, in the early days, in particular, Prabhupada was always reminding devotees, and we had devotees who would spend the whole day just, one or two devotees. If you're a new devotee, you'd spend the whole day just cleaning the temple, and just, everything, the doors, and, so it was like spotless. Anyways, he met this devotee. The devotee somehow managed to get some little prasadam for him. So he was a little inquisitive, and it was the first time coming to the temple. And then the devotee, naturally, those days book distribution was a highlight, like on everyone's consciousness. So the devotee told him, we have some books, and here's somebody who's like, very intellectual. So the devotee gives him the first canto of the Bhagavatam. So he opens the page and he reads the first verse. First verse of the first canto of the Bhagavatam, first chapter. And he said, wow. like as they say, blew his mind. So he, when he took it home, he read it, and he would, he just stopped at the first verse because it's like heavy. It's like the whole, the first and second verse. So then he came back. He says, "Do you have any more books like this?" So well. So he ended up taking the whole set, or whatever was published at that time. And because these books bring us to what is reality, tattva, the subject matter of tattva. And unless we come to know what is the truth about life, then we remain in darkness, isn't it? Knowledge of the Bhagavatam, and it begins actually with knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. Unless we actually, that's why it's recommended, first we should study subject matter from Bhagavad Gita. Only then we will be able to understand actually about Bhagavatam. Yeah. So the whole systematic way of approaching the subject matter of the absolute truth. So this is one of the, we could say, pivotal verses, very essential verses, which all of our acharyas refer to. There are, you could call it a key verse, whereby, but amazingly enough, some people will present this verse or understand it, Mayavadis will give their own interpretation, which is kind of amazing. Bhagavan, the way Srila Prabhupada explains it is, one who possesses the 6 qualities, in full. So these qualities are meant to be possessed by a person, by an individual, isn't it? So I don't know, it's difficult to understand how Mayavadis twist even verses like this to establish the impersonal aspect of Godhead as being supreme, Yeah. Although impersonalists will often refer to the Bhagavatam. They will speak on the subject matter of Krishna's pastimes. One time, actually, in the early days, in Secunderabad, Hyderabad, Secunderabad, I was the temple president in Secunderabad in the early days, and then some of our devotees from the congregation, they came to the temple and they said, "There's a great, a great philosopher or a great speaker on the Bhagavatam." I mean, in India they give Bhagavad Sapta. So they said, he speaks so wonderfully about Krishna. And then, then we asked, what kind of tilak is he wearing? He's wearing this, Be careful. Anyway, the devotee, no, he's talking Krishna Katha, So like this, the first, second, third, fourth day, they were coming and praising this person. I forget the name. Then I think on the before last day or at the end, they came after hearing his katha and they said, "You're right, actually. He was glorifying and talking about Krishna throughout, all of these days. And then today he started explaining that actually the source of all that is actually Brahman, the impersonal Brahman. So how they twist that, only they understand or misunderstand, whatever. So our system to understand the subject matter, of course, is, well, they have their own parampara as well, Guru parampara, the impersonalists. But we take our information directly from the Srimad Bhagavatam as presented to us by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And of course, even before Lord Chaitanya, we belong to one of the 4 Vaishnava Sampradayas. So in this way, the subject matter that is dealt with by our acharyas is actually very profound, very deep subject matter. And unless we get it right, then we cannot ultimately reestablish our loving relationship with Krishna. And that is the purpose throughout the Bhagavatam. The first 9 cantos of the Bhagavatam are to prepare us, to help us become sufficiently purified, so that by the time we begin to read the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, I had met one, well, he wasn't so young, maybe in his early 40s, one person in Calcutta, when I was staying at the Calcutta temple many years ago. And somehow he was taking me somewhere. I think he was visiting the Calcutta temple. And we started talking about the Bhagavatam somehow. And he had revealed to me that actually, even though he was in his early 40s, he had not yet read the Bhagavatam. or at least the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, and I asked him why, and he said, my mother told me you have to be sufficiently prepared to read the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. I mean, it's part. He was telling that their family was one of those, traditional families who have temple and who worship, very strictly like that. So, yes, the subject matter that is revealed in the 10th canto simply cannot be understood if our consciousness is not sufficiently, purified. So these are a few things on this particular verse of the Bhagavatam. Yeah. Thoughts or questions on this? Tattva.
Very different way we heard this wonderful verse, Maharaj. And as you mentioned, it's so intricate for the tattva.
Yes.
Because in Bhagavad Gita also we see Krishna several times he used the word tattva. Janma karma chameti priyam pyama abhijanati.
Yes.
That you can know me in tattva.
Yes. Yes.
That Maharaj is like, for example, the smooth tattva with Pariyavadacharya.
Yes.
Madhvacharya also called Tattvavadi.
Yes.
Madhvacharya, who began this 9 Pramayas was given by, and then Madhya Vidyabhushan also.
Yes.
Pramay Ratnavali, who gave 9 Pramayas, and then Patma Thakur Maharaj was smooth tattva.
Yes.
And our Panduracharya also, Sri Prabhupada, he also gave so much emphasis on Siddhanta tattva.
Yes. Yes.
So it's for us inspiring other person to understand this intricacy, Jiva tattva and then Ishwar tattva, Sadhan tattva, Sadhya, you mentioned some other.
Yes. Yes. Actually, I think there's a very interesting letter. I should read it to you. And it is a letter written by Srila Bhakti Raghava Thakur to his son. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. I think I have it here. Oops. And Srila Bhakti Raghava Thakur is giving very important instructions to his son, especially in reference to when I will no longer be here, you should do these different things. Now, let me see if I can find this quickly. It begins with, probably I have it here. It begins with, O Saraswati. Saraswati. Yes. And it's not coming up. But the main point is that in that short letter, he's basically giving him instructions how to develop Mayapur Dham, how to introduce educational, let's say, how to establish educational institution in Mayapur, how to print transcendental literatures, and then at the very end of the letter, he instructs him that you should very strongly present the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, and he mentions about Tattva Sandarbha also, because the Tattva Sandarbha are known as and recognized as the most, we could say, advanced philosophical treatise on the subject matter of Tattva by Srila Jiva Goswami. And there are, Srila Prabhupada makes so many different references also to the writings of Srila Jiva Goswami. So yes, the subject matter is especially taken up and elaborated upon by our main acharyas, and therefore Prabhupada inserted many of these references. I mean, we cannot avoid dealing with the subject matter of tattva. Our whole philosophy is based on tattva, and it is the most refined, subject matter, and that's why the philosophy as presented, actually this philosophy, we'll be speaking about that actually later today. The subject matter today is what is called Chaturvidya. So the first of the Chaturvidya, and I won't give the presentation now. But the first of the Chaturvidya is called Anvikshiki. Anvikshiki means science of philosophy. Yeah, nothing else can properly be understood unless we have that right. It's like unless we have the proper understanding of the basis. That's why again, the basis of basic understanding. Basic understanding begins from Bhagavad Gita, and then Srimad Bhagavatam, and then Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, and Prabhupada makes the point. Most people even miss Bhagavad Gita understanding, miss the basics. I mean, Prabhupada, we know, he was one time asked, before he had published his Bhagavad Gita, it took some time because actually his first version of Bhagavad Gita was stolen. Yeah, so he had to write the whole thing again, right? So before Prabhupada published his Bhagavad Gita, in the very early days when he was in America, some American person, lady I think, asked him, can you tell me a good edition of Bhagavad Gita? And Prabhupada relates this, he mentions that there are many editions, there's over 700 editions of the Bhagavad Gita, but he couldn't recommend one because the vast majority of them are not based on tattva. Are not based on tattva. Prabhupada makes the point that actually so many people, so many sadhus, swamis, went to America before him, spoke about Bhagavad Gita, but didn't make any devotees. Whereas Prabhupada, because he is a devotee of the Bhagavad Gita, he is coming in Guru Parampara, therefore what he spoke was effective. And so many devotees were made at that time, and so many devotees continue to be made as well, because that unless we are properly understanding and living the tattva, the knowledge which is presented, then it cannot be effective. Yeah.
The lack of tattva is the one which impels us, or what we hear the word, which is sahajiya.
The lack of
Tattva.
Yes.
Understanding.
Yes.
This is the one reason why, because they are not having sufficient knowledge about tattva. They just go to the pastimes of the Krishnas without tattva understanding.
Yes.
So there is a tendency that they can move towards the sahajiya bhava.
Yes, there is lack of proper understanding, and therefore there's all kinds of a wrong understanding of. That's why also Srila Prabhupada explains that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was well versed in tattva, to say the least, he never spoke in public. He restricted his discussions about tattva, about the culmination of tattva, means the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, only with Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Rai, isn't it? Yeah. And for the general people, general mass of people, the chanting of the holy name, and it is nice to explain also that when Lord Chaitanya was in Jagannath Puri, so many people would come and they would present some of their writings, and all of those were had to be screened by Swarup Damodar first, because most people would have something not right. And of course Swarup Damodar, who was very loving and caring for Lord Chaitanya, just didn't want to upset Lord Chaitanya in having to hear, wrong tattva. Because, unless one is coming in strict Guru Parampara, then one will have the wrong understanding. Tattva means having the full, clear understanding of reality, of the absolute truth, especially the culmination of that which we, of course, hear about and read about in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. You know that in Vrindavan, they have what is called Grantha Samadhi. You know about that? No? Yeah, Grantha Samadhi. I mean, the Goswamis have written on the subject matter of tattva things which, for most of us, are totally over our head. Yeah, and so therefore, Hare Krishna. Right. The Grantha Samadhi. And even during the time of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he had instructed, because Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, even he was so closely, he was a personal secretary of his father. I spent so many years closely associating with him. And one of the important instructions, of course, was printing books. And he wanted to print, I forget the name of the book, but a book that was like very high in terms of tattva, in terms of descriptions of Krishna's pastimes, etc. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had forbade him to actually print that book. And he had requested a few times, and finally he said, okay, you can print it, but only one copy, and only for you. Not to be distributed. Because otherwise people misunderstand. The subject matter, what the Goswamis have gifted to us, even a lot of this is yet not translated. And it's so rich, actually, in substance, in tattva. It's all connected with tattva.
One thing in today's context, today's words, transcendentalists say that learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Dharma.
Yes.
It means all of them are called here learned transcendentalists. But when we interact, learned transcendentalists.
Yes.
But when we interact, or what we understand that only who has a Bhagwan realization, like the personal devotees, they have the full understanding. They are the learned one.
Yes.
Other, like Brahman and Paramatma, they have the partial understanding.
Yes.
So how to understand this? Learned transcendentalists, they all are in this, who are understanding Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan, they all are learned transcendentalists.
Yes. So there are different levels of learned transcendentalists. These three levels of realization, it is qualitatively the same, isn't it? Just like the beginning of self-realization is aham brahmasmi, I'm spirit in nature. But within that level of spirituality, or yes, above matter, there is these, let's say, quantitative differences. Just like the jiva is also spirit, but we are minute. and therefore we are different from Krishna. So Brahman is spiritual realization, but it is one aspect, or not the full, we could say revelation or understanding of that. So they are one in understanding that Brahman is spirit. For those who are Brahman realize, or those who are Paramatma realize, they understand the spiritual, but they're lacking in the full understanding of the qualities of the personal dimension or personal aspects of Bhagavan. Yeah. So they are, again, Veda, Abheda, simultaneously one and different. They have the same understanding about the spirituality. It's connected also with what Srila Rupa Goswami, we were discussing the other day, about different types of happiness and the difference between spiritual happiness or transcendental happiness and devotional happiness, isn't it? So within transcendental happiness, there is not necessarily devotional happiness. Those who are impersonalists, they can experience this Brahman realization, this Brahmananda happiness, but they are not able to experience or relish the Premananda, because that is reserved for those who actually have that realization of the Bhagavan features of the Lord. And that subject matter is, as Krishna explains, it is actually extremely personal, extremely confidential, isn't it? It is extremely confidential, and that is also explained by Lord Krishna. Unless one becomes a devotee of Krishna, unless one actually takes up, as very elaborately outlined by Srila Rupa Goswami, by our Goswamis, then one will not be able to get that. And ultimately, unless one gets the special kripa or mercy of Krishna, that will not be there. So in other words, what Lord Chaitanya and his followers and our Vaishnavacharyas are giving us, that was Prabhupada's mood and mentality, isn't it, upon arriving in America. You know, I have been given the name Bhakti Vedanta, and I'm supposed to present what is the most refined, highest level of transcendence to those who are, completely covered by Maya. And therefore Prabhupada was in a very humble mood and mentality, praying for the mercy of the Lord. That yes, so that's a very wonderful example that Prabhupada has given from the very beginning. That although he was fully authorized and fully qualified as well, but he felt himself, he understood how it was only by miracle, and this is how we have to understand it. The Lord Chaitanya, who is described as the most munificent incarnation, Namo Mahavadhanaya, Krishna Prema. He's presenting the highest level of transcendence in the most fallen of all ages of Kali Yuga. So somehow, it's in many ways it's like a miracle that this is even taking place and possible in Kali Yuga, and especially at this particular junction where the whole of society is still extremely fallen, but yet that is the mandate that has been given to us. It's like, and this is being done from the very beginning, isn't it? We are distributing we're distributing sets of Bhagavatam to people in the street. Krishna, yoga. I mean, the basics are not even there, right? I mean, inconceivable. It's like we're giving out gold to paupers. They've never seen gold. They don't know what is gold.
You never thought in this way. So now the on the street is Maharaj.
Yeah, I mean, inconceivable, right? And of course, those fortunate souls who receive this, unexpectedly. I mean, that question was asked in a Prabhupada, who are we, what fortune, Prabhupada took. You didn't have, I created this, this has come like, even if you were, I mean, that is unconditional. Causeless. Yeah, that's the meaning of causelessness. And that process, it's only bhakti that gives us, therefore, causeless, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashubhairagam Jnanam Chayad Ahaitukam Ahaituki. Causeless knowledge and causeless detachment. It's only bhakti that can do that. That's why bhakti is so powerful and so, Yes.
Here we are saying that Brahmavadi, Paramatmavadi, and Satvavadi Bhakti. Bhakta. So sometimes we confuse Maharaj between Brahmavadi or the Mayavadi. So how to have a clear differentiation between these two? Because it's in the impersonalist, or the Mayavadi is different, or
there is, impersonalist and Mayavadi's difference. It means that if someone simply is of the understanding that there's spiritual nature, spiritual energy, such a person, if approached, can actually come from that level of Brahman realization and can be raised actually to the Bhagavan realization. But Mayavadi is someone who has kind of rejected that whole possibility that there is something beyond. Yeah. And therefore, Mayavadi, their consciousness has been totally, we could say, distorted, and therefore it's, that's why Lord Chaitanya, he would guard his devotees from approaching or reading any Mayavad literature, because it's very, very polluting. Yeah. And Prabhupada, as we know, in his lectures and purports, he would, Vaishnavas are very, very to the point of being angry against Mayavadis, and rightly so, because they deny the personal features that God can have. They are, we could say, insulting to the concept of the absolute truth. Whenever Vaishnavas come in contact with Mayavadis, there's generally, it's like, from the Vaishnava point of view, it's like very, we could say, disturbed by the philosophy that they are propagating, because ultimately the same understanding that Prabhupada is giving regarding, let's say, modern education, the whole concept of Atmahana, basically boils down to that. We are negating the possibility of an individual to actually come to know and realize who he is. Yeah. So, so in other words, it's a very, very dangerous philosophy, because it's preventing one from actually becoming and understanding who he actually is as an eternal servant of Krishna, and denying the existence of that personal feature and aspect of Godhead. So in many ways we could say it is very insensitive. Very insensitive, yeah. And therefore very dangerous, because although it may, bring one to some kind of, ananda, but that is well, as it is explained, what is that verse? Yeah, bhukti mukti siddhi kami. They can never really find the type of happiness that the soul actually is seeking. Yeah. So it's a great. Our acharyas, all of our acharyas, and Srila Prabhupada in particular, would speak very strongly, very harshly, isn't it? And many, many times against Mayavad philosophy, because it's denying. It's a type of Prabhupada uses the word suicide, isn't it? It's a suicide, denying the natural qualities, the original nature of the jiva. In other words, it's keeping us in lower consciousness, denying that we are having that original nature and quality of developing that type of that type of love, which was especially demonstrated by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's the main reason why Lord Chaitanya actually appeared, and as elaborated nicely by his immediate followers, the Goswamis of Vrindavan. Okay. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Pimanandi.
It all gets 15 minutes.